In the misty canals of Venice, a dazzling masquerade ball hides a sinister plot. Clara Moretti, a young heiress, vanishes into the night, her sapphire gown and jasmine scent the only traces left behind. Enter Hercule Poirot, whose brilliant mind unravels a web of deception woven by a charming nobleman, a secretive lace merchant, and a trail of threatening letters. From the opulent Palazzo Moretti to the shadowy islands of the lagoon, Poirot follows clues to a hidden convent where love, greed, and betrayal collide. Can he expose the conspirators and find the vanishing lady before the shadows claim her forever? Chapter 1. The Venetian Invitation. The drizzle of a late October afternoon pattered against the windows of Hercule Poirot's London flat, where the diminutive detective sat ensconced in an armchair, a cup of tisane steaming delicately in his hand. The fire in the grate cast a warm glow across the room, its orderly shelves and polished surfaces a testament to Poirot's fastidious nature. His valet, George, had just cleared away the remnants of a light luncheon when the doorbell chimed, heralding the arrival of the day's post. Among the usual bills and invitations lay an envelope of fine vellum, its edges gilded, bearing a postmark from Venice. Poirot's neatly manicured fingers slit it open with a silver letter knife, revealing a letter penned in an elegant flowing script. The sender was Signora Isabella Moretti, a widow of considerable means who resided in a grand palazzo on the Grand Canal. Her words, though courteous, carried an undercurrent of distress. She implored Poirot to journey to Venice at once to investigate the disappearance of her niece, Signorina Clara Moretti, who had vanished 3 nights prior during a masquerade ball held at the palazzo. The local polizia, she wrote, were well-meaning but ineffectual, and the absence of a ransom demand or any trace of Clara had left her desperate. Monsieur Poirot, the letter concluded, your reputation for unravelling the impossible precedes you. I beg you to lend your genius to this matter of utmost urgency. Poirot's dark eyes gleamed with interest as he stroked his immaculate moustache. Venice, with its labyrinth of canals and shadowed palazzi, was a city of secrets, a fitting stage for a mystery. The Orient Express, he knew, would carry him swiftly to the lagoon city, and the prospect of engaging his little grey cells in such an exotic setting was irresistible. He summoned George, instructing him to pack a suitcase with the precision of a military campaign, and within hours, Poirot was aboard the train, the rhythmic clatter of wheels lulling him into contemplation of the puzzle ahead. Upon arriving at the Santa Lucia station, Poirot stepped into a Venice cloaked in autumnal mist, the air heavy with the scent of salt and stone. A gondolier awaited him, a lean figure in a striped shirt named Marco, who introduced himself as Signora Moretti's trusted servant. With silent efficiency, Marco guided Poirot into a sleek black gondola, its prow slicing through the glassy waters of the Grand Canal. The city unfolded around them. Ancient palazzi loomed like silent sentinels, their reflections wavering in the water, while the distant toll of a church bell echoed through the fog. Poirot, ever observant, noted Marco's reticence, his eyes fixed on the canal, as if guarding a secret of his own. The Palazzo Moretti rose majestically from the water's edge, its Gothic arches and marble tracery a monument to Venetian opulence. Inside, Poirot was ushered into a drawing room adorned with frescoes by Tiepolo, their vibrant hues softened by the flicker of candlelight. Signora Isabella Moretti awaited him, a woman of perhaps 60, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her dark eyes sharp with intelligence and worry. She wore a gown of black silk, its severity relieved by a single emerald brooch. Rising to greet him, she extended a hand gloved in lace, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "Monsieur Poirot, your presence brings me hope," she said, gesturing to a velvet-upholstered chair. Over a glass of Prosecco, she recounted the events leading to Clara's disappearance. The masquerade ball, a tradition of the Moretti family, had drawn Venice's elite, nobles, artists, and merchants, all cloaked in costumes and masks. Clara, a spirited young woman of 22 with a cascade of chestnut curls, had been the belle of the evening, her laughter ringing through the ballroom. She was last seen in a gown of sapphire silk, a silver Colombina mask framing her luminous eyes, dancing with a man dressed as Casanova. Sometime after midnight, she was gone, as if spirited away by the very mists of Venice. Signora Moretti's composure faltered as she spoke of her niece, whom she had raised since the death of Clara's parents a decade earlier. Clara is not merely my ward, Monsieur Poirot, but the daughter of my heart. She is impulsive, yes, but not reckless. I cannot believe she would leave without a word. The polizia, she added, had searched the palazzo and questioned guests to no avail. No trace of Clara's gown, mask, or jewellery had been found, and the canal outside the palazzo yielded no grim discoveries. Yet Signora Moretti's intuition, honed by years of navigating Venetian society, told her something sinister was afoot. Poirot listened in silence, his head tilted slightly, his fingers steepled before him. The absence of a ransom note intrigued him. It suggested motives beyond mere greed, perhaps passion, jealousy, or a hidden vendetta. He assured Signora Moretti that he would begin his investigation at once, requesting access to the palazzo's staff and the guest list from the ball. As he rose to take his leave, his gaze lingered on a portrait above the mantel, a young woman with Clara's features, her eyes bright with defiance, as if challenging the world to unravel her secrets. Stepping into the cool night air, Poirot paused by the canal, the lapping water a soft counterpoint to his racing thoughts. The vanishing of Clara Moretti was no mere flight of fancy. It was a puzzle of deliberate design, and Hercule Poirot was determined to solve it. With a final glance at the palazzo's darkened windows, he murmured to himself, "The little grey cells, they are already at work." Chapter 2. The Masked Ball. The morning sun pierced the Venetian mist, casting a golden sheen across the Grand Canal as Hercule Poirot stood at the window of his guest chamber in the Palazzo Moretti. The city shimmered with an ethereal beauty, its spires and domes half veiled in haze. Yet Poirot's thoughts were not on the scenery, but on the enigma of Clara Moretti's disappearance. The masquerade ball, described by Signora Isabella Moretti as a night of revelry and splendour, held the key to the mystery. To unravel it, Poirot resolved to reconstruct the events of that fateful evening with the precision of a watchmaker assembling a delicate mechanism. His little grey cells, as he so fondly called them, were already humming with anticipation. After a breakfast of espresso and brioche, served with impeccable courtesy by a young maid named Sophia, Poirot requested a meeting with Signora Moretti in the palazzo's library. The room was a sanctuary of knowledge, its walls lined with leather-bound tomes, and its ceiling adorned with a fresco of Apollo, driving his chariot across the heavens. Signora Moretti, dressed in a charcoal grey gown that spoke of understated wealth, joined him promptly, her expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. Poirot, seated at a mahogany table, opened his notebook, its pages crisp and awaiting the orderly march of his observations. "Madame," he began, his voice measured, "to find Mademoiselle Clara, we must first understand the night she vanished. Tell me, if you please, every detail of the masquerade ball, its guests, its atmosphere, and any moment that struck you as unusual." Signora Moretti nodded, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "The ball is an annual tradition, Monsieur Poirot, held to honour my late husband's family. This year we welcomed nearly 100 guests, nobles, artists, and a few foreign dignitaries. The theme was Il Carnaval, and all wore masks and costumes, as is the custom. Clara was radiant, dressed as a Venetian noblewoman in sapphire silk, her mask a silver colombina studded with pearls. She danced, laughed, and charmed everyone, as she always does. I last saw her near the stroke of 11, twirling with a man dressed as Casanova, a striking figure in a black velvet cloak and tricorn hat. Poirot's pencil paused over his notebook. This Casanova, do we know his identity? Yes, Signora Moretti replied. He was Conte Lorenzo Valieri, a nobleman of an old but impoverished family. He is known for his charm, though his debts are no secret in Venice. And after this dance? Poirot pressed, his eyes narrowing. Signora Moretti frowned, her memory straining. Clara moved through the crowd, speaking with friends. I was occupied with guests and cannot say precisely when she vanished. By midnight, when I sought her for the final toast, she was gone. I assumed she had retired to her room, but when I checked, it was empty. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing the details. A ball, with its chaos of masks and merriment, was the perfect stage for a disappearance, whether voluntary or coerced. He requested the guest list and permission to question the palazzo's staff, both of which Signora Moretti granted without hesitation. Armed with this, Poirot began his investigation in earnest, starting with the ballroom itself, where the echoes of that night might still linger. The ballroom was a cavernous space, its marble floor polished to a mirror-like sheen, its walls adorned with gilded mirrors and tapestries depicting Venetian triumphs. Chandeliers of Murano glass hung from the ceiling, their prisms catching the light in a cascade of rainbows. Poirot paced the room, his small, precise steps a contrast to its grandeur, his eyes scanning for anything out of place. The staff, bustling about to restore order after the ball, paused to answer his questions, their Venetian accents thick with deference. The head footman, a wiry man named Paolo, described the evening as lively but orderly. Guests had arrived in a procession of gondolas, their costumes ranging from harlequins to dojis, their identities concealed until the unmasking at midnight, a tradition Clara had not stayed to observe. Paolo recalled seeing her dance with several partners, including the Conte, but noted nothing suspicious. Yet Poirot detected a flicker of unease in the man's eyes when he mentioned the palazzo's butler, Giovanni, who had overseen the servants that night. Giovanni, a stooped figure with a face like weathered parchment, was less forthcoming. When Poirot questioned him about the guest list, he claimed it was complete, but admitted to misplacing a few late additions. His hands trembled slightly as he spoke, and Poirot, ever attuned to such subtleties, marked him for closer scrutiny. Monsieur Giovanni, he said smoothly, the truth, it is like a fine wine. It must be handled with care, lest it spill. You will tell me more in time. Leaving the butler, Poirot continued his inspection, his attention drawn to a heavy tapestry depicting the Battle of Lepanto. Behind it, he discovered a panel in the wall, cunningly concealed, that opened to reveal a narrow staircase descending to a small door at the canal's edge. The door was unlocked, its hinges well-oiled, suggesting recent use. As Poirot bent to examine the threshold, a faint but unmistakable scent reached his nostrils. Jasmine, delicate and floral, the very perfume Signora Moretti had said Clara favoured. He straightened, his moustache twitching with satisfaction. Mon Dieu, he murmured. The lady, she has left a trace. The discovery of the hidden door suggested possibilities. Had Clara fled the palazzo of her own accord, or had someone spirited her away through this secret exit? To answer this, Poirot needed to know more about the guests, particularly the mysterious Casanova, Conte Valieri. He instructed Marco, the gondolier, to ferry him to the Conte's residence, a decaying palazzo on the opposite side of the Grand Canal. The journey was silent, save for the rhythmic splash of Marco's oar, and Poirot used the time to reflect. A young woman of wealth and beauty, vanishing without a trace, pointed to motives of passion, greed, or vengeance. The absence of a ransom note ruled out simple kidnapping, but the jasmine scent and the hidden door hinted at a plan executed with care. The Palazzo Valieri was a shadow of its former glory, its facade crumbling, its windows clouded with grime. Conte Lorenzo Valieri received Poirot in a salon that retained a faded elegance, its walls hung with portraits of stern ancestors. The Conte, a man in his early 30s, was the epitome of Venetian charm. Tall, with dark curls and eyes that sparkled with mischief, he lounged in a velvet jacket, a glass of grappa in hand. His costume from the ball, the Casanova cloak and hat, hung carelessly over a chair, as if mocking Poirot's inquiry. "Monsieur le Comte," Poirot began, his tone polite but firm, "you danced with Mademoiselle Clara on the night she disappeared. Tell me, if you please, what passed between you." Valieri's smile was disarming, but his eyes were wary. "Clara, a delightful girl, full of spirit. We danced a waltz, perhaps two. She was in high spirits, laughing about the masks and the music. After our dance, she said she wished to speak with a friend and left me. I saw her no more that night." "And this friend?" Poirot asked, his gaze unwavering. Valieri shrugged. "She did not say. I assumed it was one of the ladies. Perhaps Signorina Beatrice Gatti, the opera singer. They are close, I believe." Poirot made a mental note of the name. "And you, monsieur, what did you do after this parting?" "I mingled, drank, danced," Valieri replied airily. "It was a ball, after all. I left around 1 after the unmasking and returned home." His nonchalance was too practiced, Poirot thought, like an actor reciting lines. He thanked the Conte and departed, his mind turning to Beatrice Gatti. If she was Clara's confidant, she might hold a piece of the puzzle. Marco rode him to the Teatro La Fenice, where Beatrice was rehearsing for an upcoming opera. The theatre's opulent interior, with its crimson curtains and gilded boxes, was a fitting backdrop for the fiery soprano. Beatrice, a woman of striking beauty with raven hair and a commanding presence, paused her rehearsal to speak with Poirot, her expression one of guarded curiosity. "Monsieur Poirot, I am devastated by Clara's disappearance," she said, her voice rich with emotion. "She was like a sister to me. At the ball, I saw her dancing with Lorenzo, Conte Valieri, that is. But I was performing arias for the guests and could not join her. Later, I looked for her, but she was gone." "You saw nothing unusual?" Poirot pressed, noting the slight flush in her cheeks when Valieri's name was mentioned. "Nothing," Beatrice insisted, though her fingers toyed nervously with a silk scarf. "It was a night of masks, monsieur. People come and go like shadows." Poirot thanked her and left the theatre, his suspicions deepening. Beatrice's affection for Valieri was evident, but was it mere infatuation, or did it conceal a darker role in Clara's fate? Back at the Palazzo Moretti, he requested access to Clara's chambers, hoping to find a clue to her state of mind. The room was a vision of elegance, a four-poster bed draped in silk, a vanity laden with perfumes and jewels, and a window overlooking the canal. Among Clara's possessions, Poirot found a silver locket containing a miniature of a young man, later identified by Sophia the maid as Henry Whitfield, an English scholar and Clara's secret fiancé. Whitfield, Poirot learned, had been absent from the ball due to a fever. Resolving to visit him, Poirot first examined Clara's vanity, where a vial of jasmine perfume confirmed the scent from the hidden door. A small velvet box, tucked beneath a pile of letters, caught his eye. Inside was a sapphire ring, its stone matching the hue of Clara's ball gown. A note tucked beneath it, in Clara's hand, read, "For H, when the time is right." The discovery suggested Clara had plans for her future, plans that might have provoked someone's ire. As evening fell, Poirot stood by the canal, the palazzo's reflection rippling in the water. The ball had been a masquerade not only of faces but of motives. Vallieri's charm, Beatrice's passion, Giovanni's evasiveness, and the hidden door all pointed to a conspiracy woven with Venetian subtlety. Clara had not simply vanished, she had been drawn into a web of secrets. Poirot's task was to trace its threads, and he would begin with Henry Whitfield, whose absence from the ball was perhaps too convenient. With a final glance at the darkening sky, Poirot murmured, "The game, it is afoot, and Hercule Poirot shall not be outwitted." Chapter 3. The Conte's Secrets. The morning mist clung to the canals of Venice, weaving a gossamer veil over the city as Hercule Poirot stepped into Marco's gondola, his mind alight with the threads of the mystery surrounding Clara Moretti's disappearance. The events of the masquerade ball, as recounted by Signora Moretti and corroborated by the ballroom's silent clues, pointed to a deliberate act, and Poirot's suspicions now turned toward Conte Lorenzo Vallieri, the charming nobleman who had danced with Clara before she vanished. The Conte's palazzo, a relic of faded grandeur, held secrets, and Poirot was determined to uncover them with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Marco rowed with his usual taciturn efficiency, guiding the gondola through narrow rios where the water lapped against moss-covered stones. Poirot, clad in a perfectly tailored overcoat, his Homburg hat tilted at a precise angle, observed the city's pulse, the cries of vendors, the flutter of pigeons, the distant strains of a violin. Venice was a city of masks, not only during Carnival, but in the daily dance of its inhabitants, and Poirot knew that beneath Vallieri's polished exterior lay a truth waiting to be unmasked. The Palazzo Vallieri loomed ahead, its crumbling facade a stark contrast to the Moretti's opulent splendour. Ivy clung to its walls, and several windows were boarded, hinting at the Conte's financial straits. A liveried servant, his livery threadbare, admitted Poirot into a salon where the air was heavy with the scent of old wood and wax. The room retained a vestige of elegance, tarnished silver candelabra, a chipped Venetian mirror, but its decay was palpable. Conte Lorenzo Vallieri awaited him, reclining on a brocade sofa, a cigarette dangling from his fingers. His dark eyes, framed by lashes that would have been the envy of any debutante, sparkled with a mixture of amusement and wariness. "Monsieur Poirot," Vallieri said, rising with a languid grace, "to what do I owe this second visit? Surely our brief chat yesterday satisfied your curiosity." Poirot's moustache twitched as he took the offered seat, a creaking chair that protested under even his slight weight. "Monsieur le Comte," he began, his voice smooth as polished marble, "Hercule Poirot is never satisfied until the truth is laid bare. You danced with Mademoiselle Clara, you say, and then she left you to join a friend. Yet no one saw her after this moment. I ask you now to tell me all, every word, every glance, every gesture, the smallest detail. It may be the key to her fate." Vallieri's smile faltered, though he quickly recovered, exhaling a plume of smoke. "You make it sound so dramatic, monsieur." "Very well. Clara was enchanting, as always. We danced a quadrille, then a waltz. She spoke of the ball, the costumes, how she adored the anonymity of the masks. She seemed preoccupied, perhaps, but I thought it was merely the excitement of the evening. When we parted, she said she needed air and would step onto the terrace. I offered to accompany her, but she declined, saying she would return shortly. I did not see her again." Poirot's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, noted the slight tightening of Vallieri's jaw. "The terrace, you say? And yet, the terrace of the Palazzo Moretti is visible from the ballroom. No one saw Mademoiselle Clara there." You are certain of your recollection? Vallieri's fingers drummed lightly on the arm of the sofa. It was a crowded night, monsieur. Perhaps I'm mistaken about the terrace. She simply said she needed a moment alone. I returned to the ballroom and danced with others, Signorina Gatti for one. The mention of Beatrice Gatti piqued Poirot's interest. Ah, the opera singer. She confirms this, I presume. Of course, Vallieri replied too quickly. Beatrice and I are old friends. She was performing that night, but we shared a dance later. She will tell you I was with her until the unmasking. Poirot made a mental note to verify this alibi, sensing a rehearsed quality to Vallieri's words. He shifted tack. Monsieur, you are a man of the world, non? A nobleman, yet the whispers of Venice speak of debts, of creditors circling like vultures. Tell me, did Mademoiselle Clara, with her considerable fortune, ever discuss matters of money with you? Vallieri's face darkened, and he stubbed out his cigarette with unnecessary force. You overstep, Monsieur Poirot. My finances are my own concern. Clara and I spoke of art, music, the beauty of Venice, not vulgar matters like money. If you imply I had designs on her wealth, you are gravely mistaken. Poirot inclined his head, his expression unreadable. I imply nothing, monsieur. I observe, I question, I deduce, and I observe that you are a man of charm, yet charm alone does not pay the debts of a palazzo such as this. He rose, adjusting his gloves. I thank you for your time. We shall speak again, I think. As Poirot departed, he caught a glimpse of Vallieri's reflection in the clouded mirror, a man whose composure had cracked, if only for a moment. The Conte was hiding something, but whether it was guilt or mere embarrassment at his poverty, Poirot could not yet say. He instructed Marco to take him to the lodgings of Henry Whitfield, Clara's secret fiancé, whose absence from the ball intrigued him. Whitfield resided in a modest apartment near the Accademia, its walls lined with sketches of Venetian architecture and reproductions of Bellini's paintings. The young Englishman, pale and gaunt from his recent illness, greeted Poirot with a mixture of hope and despair. His sandy hair was dishevelled, his blue eyes shadowed with worry. Monsieur Poirot, he said, his voice breaking, have you found her? Is Clara safe? Poirot, seated on a worn chair, studied Whitfield closely. Not yet, Monsieur Whitfield. But Hercule Poirot does not abandon a puzzle. You were not at the ball, I understand, due to illness. Tell me of Mademoiselle Clara, of your engagement, and of anything she may have said before her disappearance. Whitfield's hands trembled as he poured tea, the cup rattling against the saucer. Clara and I met 6 months ago at an art lecture. She was radiant, full of life, curious about everything. We fell in love, but Signora Moretti disapproved, saying I was beneath Clara's station. We kept our engagement secret, planning to marry once Clara came into her inheritance next year. She was happy, but lately, she seemed anxious. She received letters, unsigned, threatening. They told her to beware the shadows and to trust no one. I begged her to show them to the polizia, but she feared it would anger her aunt. Poirot's interest sharpened. These letters, you have seen them? Whitfield nodded, retrieving a folded sheet from a desk drawer. The paper was heavy, its ink a stark black, the words written in a precise, unfamiliar hand. The shadows watch you, Clara. Leave Venice, or they will claim you. Poirot pocketed the letter, his mind racing. The warning suggested a threat known to Clara, perhaps tied to her fortune or her engagement. And the night of the ball, he asked. Did she speak of attending? She was excited, Whitfield said, his voice softening. She described her gown, her mask. She promised to slip away early to visit me, but she never came. I thought she'd changed her mind until I heard she was missing. Poirot's gaze softened, but only slightly. Whitfield's grief seemed genuine, yet his absence from the ball could be a convenient alibi. Thanking him, Poirot returned to the Palazzo Moretti, where he sought out Sophia, the maid who had identified Whitfield's miniature in Clara's locket. Sophia, a slight girl with nervous eyes, confirmed that Clara had been secretive in recent weeks, often whispering with Giovanni, the butler, in the corridors. She trusted him, Sophia said. But Giovanni, he's been strange since the ball. Keeps to himself, avoids questions. Poirot's suspicions of Giovanni deepened. He found the butler polishing silver in the pantry, his movements mechanical. Monsieur Giovanni, Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. You have served the Moretti family long, oui? You knew Mademoiselle Clara well. Tell me, what did she confide in you before the ball? Giovanni's polishing slowed, his eyes fixed on the silver. Nothing, signore. She was happy, excited for the ball. I know nothing of her disappearance. Poirot leaned closer, his voice a velvet blade. And yet you tremble, monsieur. The guest list, it was incomplete. The hidden door, it was used. You know more than you say. Speak, or Hercule Poirot will uncover your secrets another way. Giovanni paled, but remained silent, muttering only that he had duties to attend. Poirot let him go, knowing fear would loosen the butler's tongue in time. As he stood in the pantry, the scent of jasmine lingered faintly, a ghostly reminder of Clara's presence. The Conte's charm, Whitfield's grief, Giovanni's evasiveness, and the threatening letters formed a tapestry of deception, each thread leading to the heart of the mystery. Poirot resolved to pursue Beatrice Gatti next, her connection to Valieri a potential key. As the Venetian dusk settled, painting the canals in hues of amber and shadow, Poirot murmured to himself, "The truth, it hides behind the mask, but Hercule Poirot will find it." Chapter 4. Shadows on the Canal. The twilight of Venice draped the city in a cloak of mystery, its canals reflecting the last glimmers of daylight as Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the Palazzo Moretti's private dock. The faint scent of jasmine, detected at the hidden door behind the ballroom tapestry, lingered in his mind, a delicate clue to Clara Moretti's fate. The anonymous letter shown to him by Henry Whitfield, with its ominous warning to beware the shadows, suggested a threat that had driven Clara to flee or be taken. Poirot's little grey cells buzzed with the challenge of untangling this web, and he resolved to follow the threads wherever they led, even into the shadowed heart of Venice. Determined to trace Clara's movements, Poirot summoned Marco, the gondolier, whose silent demeanour and intimate knowledge of the city's waterways made him an invaluable ally. Over a simple supper of risotto and vino bianco in the palazzo's kitchen, Poirot outlined his plan. "Monsieur Marco," he said, his eyes gleaming with purpose, "the canals, they are the veins of Venice, carrying its secrets. Tonight, we shall navigate them, seeking the places where shadows gather. You know these waters as a painter knows his canvas, oui?" Marco nodded, his weathered face impassive. "Si, signore. I know every rio, every calle. Where do you wish to go?" Poirot considered the letter's cryptic phrase. "The shadows," he mused. "They are not mere metaphor, I think. Take me to the places near the Palazzo Moretti where one might hide, or watch unseen. The Rialto, perhaps, or the quieter canals where the night is thick." With a lantern swaying gently at the gondola's prow, Marco rowed Poirot through the labyrinthine waterways, the oar slicing the water with a rhythmic hush. The city was alive with whispers, the laughter of a distant tavern, the creak of a shutter, the soft splash of another gondola passing unseen. Poirot's senses were alert, his mind cataloguing every detail: the flicker of candlelight in a high window, the echo of footsteps in a narrow alley. Near the Rialto Bridge, where the canal widened and the market's bustle had faded into night, Poirot's attention was drawn to a cloaked figure moving swiftly along the fondamenta. "Marco, slow," Poirot whispered, his hand raised. The gondolier obeyed, guiding the craft into the shadow of a palazzo. The figure paused at the mouth of a calle, glancing about before slipping into its darkness. Poirot's heart quickened. The movement was furtive, deliberate. "Follow, but with care," he instructed. Marco manoeuvred the gondola to a nearby landing, and Poirot, with surprising agility for a man of his fastidious appearance, disembarked and pursued on foot. The Calais was narrow, its walls damp and mossy, the air heavy with the scent of the lagoon. Poirot moved silently, his patent leather shoes making no sound on the worn stones. Ahead, he heard the low murmur of voices, too faint to discern words, but urgent in tone. Creeping closer, he crouched behind a stack of crates, his eyes straining in the dim light. Two figures stood in the shadows, one cloaked, the other in a sailor's cap. Their conversation was brief, punctuated by the word delivery and a mention of the island. Before Poirot could edge closer, the figures parted, the cloaked one vanishing into another alley. As Poirot stepped forward, his foot brushed against a soft object, a handkerchief embroidered with the initials BG. Poirot's moustache twitched as he pocketed the find. Beatrice Gatti, the opera singer, had claimed ignorance of Clara's fate, yet her handkerchief, dropped in this clandestine meeting, suggested otherwise. Returning to the gondola, Poirot instructed Marco to take him to the Teatro La Fenice, where Beatrice might still be rehearsing. The theatre's golden interior glowed warmly, a stark contrast to the chill of the canals. Beatrice, in a crimson gown, was practicing arias, her voice soaring through the empty auditorium. She paused as Poirot approached, her dark eyes narrowing. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her tone guarded. "You return so soon. Have you news of Clara?" Poirot held up the handkerchief, its embroidered initials catching the light. "Mademoiselle Gatti, this was found in a place where secrets are whispered. It bears your initials. You will explain, if you please, how it came to be in a dark Calais near the Rialto, where talk of a delivery and an island was overheard." Beatrice's face paled, but her chin lifted defiantly. "That handkerchief was stolen from my dressing room weeks ago. I know nothing of your colour or your whispers. You accuse me unjustly, monsieur." Poirot's gaze was unyielding. "Stolen, you say? Yet you were at the ball, close to Mademoiselle Clara, and you are close to Conte Valieri, whose truthfulness I question. If you are innocent, mademoiselle, help me. What did Clara say to you before she vanished? Did she speak of fear, of threats?" Beatrice hesitated, her fingers twisting the hem of her scarf. "Clara was restless that night. She told me she felt watched, as if eyes followed her through the crowd. I thought it was the masks, the wine, playing tricks on her. She mentioned a letter, one that frightened her, but she would not show it to me. I urged her to tell her aunt, but she refused, saying it would cause a scandal." Poirot nodded, filing away this confirmation of the anonymous letters. "And Conte Valieri? You danced with him, you say. Did he speak of Clara?" Beatrice's flush returned, betraying her feelings. "Lorenzo? He said only that Clara was charming as always. He was with me most of the evening after their dance. He could not have harmed her." Poirot thanked her, his mind racing. Beatrice's loyalty to Valieri clouded her judgment, but her mention of Clara's fear aligned with Whitfield's account. The handkerchief, whether stolen or not, linked her to the mysterious meeting, and the talk of an island intrigued him. Returning to the Palazzo Moretti, Poirot sought Clara's room once more, hoping to uncover a clue to her state of mind. The room, bathed in moonlight, was as he had left it. The four-poster bed, the vanity with its jasmine perfume, the locket with Whitfield's miniature. Poirot searched methodically, his gloved hands sifting through drawers and shelves. Beneath a stack of silk gloves, he found a small diary, its leather cover embossed with Clara's initials. The entries were brief, written in her elegant hand, detailing her love for Whitfield and her dreams of a life beyond Venice. But the later pages grew darker, describing a watcher who followed her through the canals, whose presence she felt even in the palazzo. The final entry, dated the night of the ball, read, "Tonight, I will face the truth. I know who he is, and I will not run." Poirot's heart quickened. Clara had known her pursuer, or at least suspected them. The diary suggested she had gone to the ball not as a carefree guest, but as one seeking answers. Had she confronted someone, Valieri perhaps, or another, and paid a price? The mention of an island in the overheard conversation gnawed at him. Venice's lagoon was dotted with islands, some inhabited, others abandoned. San Michele, the cemetery isle, was too public, but others, like Torcello or Burano, could conceal a fugitive or a captive. As Poirot closed the diary, a soft sound reached his ears, a rustle from the corridor. He stepped to the door, peering into the shadowed hallway, but saw only the flicker of a candle disappearing around a corner. Suspicious, he returned to the library, where Signora Moretti was reviewing accounts, her face drawn with worry. Poirot shared his findings, omitting the diary's details to avoid alarming her further. "Madame," he said, "I believe Mademoiselle Clara did not vanish by chance. She knew of a danger, and she may have sought to meet it. Tell me, did she ever speak of the islands? Burano, Torcello, or others?" Signora Moretti frowned. "Burano, once. She visited a lace merchant there, Signora Elena Rossi, to commission a veil. I thought it odd, as Clara rarely wore lace, but she insisted it was for a gift." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A veil, you say? Most interesting. I shall visit this Signora Rossi tomorrow. For now, madame, ensure the palazzo is secure. The shadows, they are closer than we think." As he retired to his chamber, the distant toll of a church bell echoed over the canals. The handkerchief, the diary, the talk of an island, all pointed to a conspiracy tightening around Clara. Beatrice's involvement, whether witting or not, and Valieri's evasiveness suggested a plot rooted in greed or passion. Poirot lay awake, his mind a kaleidoscope of clues, certain that the truth lay just beyond the next shadow. Chapter 5. The Island of Secrets. The dawn broke over Venice with a soft, opalescent light, painting the canals in hues of pearl and rose as Hercule Poirot prepared for a journey into the lagoon. The clues unearthed thus far, the jasmine-scented hidden door, the ominous letters, Clara Moretti's diary with its cryptic final entry, and the whispered talk of an island overheard near the Rialto, pointed to a conspiracy that extended beyond the city's stone and water. Poirot's little grey cells churned with possibilities, and the mention of Burano, where Clara had visited a lace merchant, beckoned as the next thread in the tapestry of this mystery. He resolved to pursue it with the relentless precision that had made him a legend. After a breakfast of espresso and cornetto served by the ever-watchful Sophia, Poirot summoned Marco, the gondolier, whose knowledge of the lagoon's islands was as vital as his silence. "Monsieur Marco," Poirot said, adjusting his Homburg hat as he stepped into the gondola, "today we venture to Burano, to the shop of Signora Elena Rossi. You will tell me, if you please, what you know of this woman and her trade." Marco's eyes, shadowed beneath his cap, met Poirot's briefly. "Signora Rossi is respected, signore, but private. Her lace is the finest in Burano, sought by nobles and foreigners alike. Some say she knows more of Venice's secrets than she tells, for her shop is a place where whispers are traded as freely as coin." Poirot nodded, filing away this insight. The gondola glided from the Grand Canal into the open lagoon, the water stretching wide and glassy under a sky streaked with clouds. Burano emerged like a painter's palette, its houses a riot of colour, vermilion, cobalt, saffron, each reflected in the still waters. The island's charm belied its isolation, a place where secrets could be buried as easily as lace could be woven. Poirot's anticipation grew. If Clara had come here, it was not merely for a veil. Signora Elena Rossi's shop was a modest storefront, its windows displaying delicate lace that shimmered like frost. Inside, the air was cool, scented with lavender and starch. Elena herself, a woman in her 50s with steel-grey hair and eyes like polished jet, greeted Poirot with a guarded courtesy. Her hands, calloused from years of needlework, moved with a restless energy as she arranged a display of veils. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low and measured, "I am honoured, but surprised. Why does a detective from London visit my humble shop?" Poirot's smile was disarming, his tone velvet smooth. "Signora Rossi, I seek the truth about Mademoiselle Clara Moretti, who came to you before her disappearance. She purchased a lace veil, I am told. You will share with me, if you please. What passed between you?" Eleanor's hands stilled, though her expression remained composed. "Clara, yes. A lovely girl. She came perhaps a week ago seeking a veil for a gift. She chose a simple design, paid generously, and left. I know nothing of her disappearance." Poirot's eyes narrowed, noting the faint tremor in her fingers. "A simple veil, you say? Yet Signora Moretti tells me Clara rarely wore lace. For whom was this gift, Signora? And what else did she speak of during her visit?" Elena's gaze flickered to a corner of the shop, where a basket of lace scraps sat. "She mentioned no names. We spoke of the weather, the beauty of Burano. She seemed distracted, perhaps, but nothing more." Poirot stepped closer to the basket, his movements deliberate. "Distracted or afraid? Mademoiselle Clara received letters warning her of danger. Did she confide in you, Signora, about a watcher or a threat?" Elena's lips tightened, but she shook her head. "No, monsieur. She said nothing of letters or watchers. You waste your time here." Undeterred, Poirot sifted through the basket, his gloved fingers pausing on a scrap of paper caught among the lace. It was a corner of a letter, its texture and ink matching the anonymous note Whitfield had shown him. The fragment bore a single word: shadows. Poirot's moustache twitched with triumph. "This paper, Signora, it is most curious. It matches a letter sent to Mademoiselle Clara, a letter of warning. How does it find its way to your shop?" Eleanor's composure cracked, her hands clenching. I know nothing of it. Customers leave papers, receipts. It could belong to anyone." Poirot's voice was soft, but unyielding. "Yet it is here, Signora, among your lace. You will tell me the truth, or Hercule Poirot will find it another way." Elena remained silent, her eyes darting to the door, but Poirot pressed no further, knowing fear would loosen her tongue in time. He pocketed the scrap and departed, instructing Marco to return him to Venice. Back at the Palazzo Moretti, Poirot sought Signora Moretti in her private study, a room adorned with family portraits and a view of the canal. He shared his findings from Burano, omitting the paper scrap to avoid alarming her. "Madame," he said, "Mademoiselle Clara's visit to Burano suggests she sought more than lace. I believe she was investigating a threat, perhaps tied to her inheritance. Tell me, what do you know of this fortune she is to receive?" Signora Moretti's face tightened, her fingers tracing the edge of a ledger. "Clara's parents left her a substantial estate, held in trust until her 23rd birthday or her marriage, whichever comes first. It includes properties in Venice and a considerable sum in gold. I have managed it carefully, but my own funds. They are not what they once were. The palazzo is costly to maintain." Poirot's mind seized on this. A fortune awaiting Clara could tempt many. Valieri with his debts, Whitfield with his secret engagement, even Signora Moretti herself, whose wealth was waning. "And who else knows of this inheritance?" he asked. "Only the family lawyer, Signor Bellini, and perhaps Clara's closest friends," she replied. "I kept it private to protect her." Poirot nodded, but his thoughts turned to Giovanni, the butler. whose evasiveness suggested knowledge beyond his station. He found Giovanni in the wine cellar, cataloguing bottles with a distracted air. "Monsieur Giovanni," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, "you knew of Mademoiselle Clara's fortune, oui? Did she speak of it, or of threats to it, before the ball?" Giovanni's hands shook, a bottle nearly slipping from his grasp. I heard whispers, signore, servants' talk, but Clara, she told me nothing. I swear it." Poirot's gaze was piercing. "And yet you know more than you say. The hidden door, the letters, the shadows. Someone in this palazzo is not what they seem. Speak, or the consequences will be severe." Giovanni's face crumpled, but before he could respond, a scream shattered the silence, echoing from the canal-side entrance. Poirot raced toward the sound, his small frame moving with surprising speed. At the water's edge, he found Giovanni slumped against the wall, a knife protruding from his shoulder, blood pooling on the stones. The butler was alive, but barely conscious, muttering, They know I heard." Poirot called for help, and Sophia and Paolo rushed to tend Giovanni. As the butler was carried to safety, Poirot examined the scene. The knife was a common kitchen blade, but its placement suggested a warning, not a fatal intent. No footprints marked the damp stones, but the faint scent of jasmine lingered, a ghostly echo of Clara's presence. Poirot's mind raced. The attack on Giovanni confirmed a conspiracy, one that feared exposure. The butler had overheard something, perhaps the same delivery Poirot had caught near the Rialto. As night fell, Poirot stood by the canal, the palazzo's lanterns casting flickering shadows. The paper scrap from Burano, the diary's mention of a watcher, and Giovanni's attack pointed to a plot centered on Clara's fortune. Elena Rossi's evasiveness and the talk of an island suggested a hiding place or a trap. Poirot resolved to return to Burano, but first he would confront Beatrice Gatti again, her handkerchief tying her to the shadows. The truth was close, he felt, lurking just beyond the next bend in the canal. Chapter 6. The Unravelling Thread. The air in Venice hung heavy with the promise of rain, the canals reflecting a sky bruised with clouds, as Hercule Poirot stood in the courtyard of the Palazzo Moretti. The attack on Giovanni, the butler, had cast a pall over the household, and the faint scent of jasmine, ever present at the scene of the crime, wove itself into the tapestry of clues that Poirot's little grey cells were tirelessly assembling. The paper scrap from Burano, the anonymous letters, Clara Moretti's diary, and the whispered talk of an island all pointed to a conspiracy that was now striking closer to home. Giovanni's muttered words, "They know I heard," suggested he had stumbled upon a secret that endangered him, and perhaps Clara. Poirot resolved to press forward, his determination as unyielding as the stones beneath his polished shoes. After ensuring Giovanni was under the care of a physician, Poirot visited the butler in a small chamber off the servants' quarters, where he lay bandaged but alert. The room was sparse, its only adornment a crucifix above the bed, and the air carried the sharp scent of antiseptic. Giovanni's weathered face was pale, his eyes darting nervously as Poirot took a seat beside him. "Monsieur Giovanni," Poirot began, his voice soft but commanding, "you have survived a grave warning. The knife, it was not meant to kill, but to silence. You will tell me now what you heard, or the next blade may find a more fatal mark." Giovanni's hands clutched the blanket, his voice barely a whisper. "Signore, I meant no harm. I overheard a plan in the pantry the night of the ball. Voices, low, speaking of taking Clara, of her fortune. They said she must be persuaded or removed. I did not see their faces, only shadows through the door. I told no one, but they must have known I heard." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And these voices, they mentioned a place? An island, perhaps?" Giovanni hesitated, then nodded. "See, An island. They spoke of a safe place in the lagoon, where none would look. I thought it was idle talk, until Clara vanished. Poirot pressed further, but Giovanni's fear overcame him, and he would say no more, claiming exhaustion. Poirot left him to rest, his mind racing. The butler's confession confirmed the overheard conversation near the Rialto, tying the plot to Clara's inheritance and a hidden refuge in the lagoon. The scent of jasmine at the canal entrance suggested Clara had passed through the hidden door, perhaps fleeing the threat Giovanni had overheard. But had she escaped or been spirited away? The answer lay with the conspirators, and Poirot's suspicions circled Conte Lorenzo Valieri, Beatrice Gatti, and the enigmatic Elena Rossi. Determined to tighten the net, Poirot returned to the Teatro La Fenice, where Beatrice was rehearsing a new opera, her voice echoing through the gilded auditorium like a siren's call. He found her in her dressing room, surrounded by costumes and mirrors, her raven hair unbound, her expression wary as he entered. "Mademoiselle Gatti," Poirot said, producing the handkerchief with her initials. "You claimed this was stolen, yet it was found where secrets were whispered. I ask you now, for the sake of Mademoiselle Clara, to speak the truth. What do you know of a plan, of an island, of a delivery?" Beatrice's eyes flashed with defiance, but her hands betrayed her, twisting a velvet ribbon. "I told you, monsieur, the handkerchief was stolen. I know nothing of islands or deliveries. Why do you hound me when Clara is the one missing?" Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "Because, mademoiselle, you are linked to Conte Valieri, whose debts are a motive, and to Clara, whose fear you dismissed. If you are innocent, help me. Did Clara speak of her plans that night, of confronting someone?" Beatrice's shoulders slumped, her voice softening. She was agitated, yes. She said she had learned something about someone she trusted. She wouldn't say who, only that she would end it at the ball. I thought it was about her engagement to Henry Whitfield, that she meant to defy her aunt. I begged her to be careful, but she laughed, saying she was tired of hiding. Poirot nodded, the pieces aligning. Clara's diary had hinted at facing the truth, and Beatrice's words suggested she had gone to the ball with a purpose, to confront a betrayer. But who? Valieri, with his charm and debts? Elena, with her suspicious paper scrap? Or another, yet unseen? Poirot thanked Beatrice and left, his mind turning to the island mentioned by Giovanni and the Rialto conspirators. Back at the Palazzo Moretti, Poirot gathered Signora Moretti, Sophia, and Paolo in the library, seeking any overlooked detail. Sophia, hesitant, revealed that Clara had been seen speaking with Giovanni days before the ball, near the hidden door. "She looked frightened, signore," Sophia said, but Giovanni told her to trust him, that he would help. Paolo, the footman, added that he had seen a gondola linger near the canal entrance after the ball, its occupant cloaked and unidentifiable. These revelations strengthened Poirot's hypothesis. Clara had not been kidnapped, but had fled, possibly with Giovanni's aid, to escape a threat tied to her fortune. The attack on Giovanni suggested the conspirators feared he knew too much. To test his theory, Poirot decided to stage a dramatic confrontation, a method he favoured for shaking loose the truth. He instructed Signora Moretti to summon Conte Valieri, Beatrice Gatti, Henry Whitfield, and Elena Rossi to the ballroom that evening, claiming he had news of Clara's fate. The ballroom, lit by chandeliers, was a stage of glittering suspense as the guests assembled. Valieri arrived in his velvet jacket, his smile masking unease. Beatrice, in a gown of emerald silk, stood close to him. Whitfield, pale and anxious, clutched a book of Venetian poetry. Elena, austere in black, her eyes like daggers, and Signora Moretti, regal but tense, watched from a throne-like chair. Poirot stood at the centre, his small frame commanding the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice resonant, Mademoiselle Clara Moretti did not vanish by chance. She uncovered a plot, one woven with greed and deception, to seize her inheritance. This plot, it was born here, in this very palazzo, and its threads lead to each of you. A murmur rippled through the group, but Poirot raised a hand. Monsieur le Comte, he turned to Vallieri, your debts are a burden, and Clara's fortune a temptation. You danced with her, perhaps to lure her, oui? But she sensed your intent and fled through the hidden door, her jasmine scent marking her path. Vallieri's face reddened. This is outrageous. I admired Clara, nothing more. Poirot's eyes shifted to Elena. Signora Rossi, you met Clara in Burano, where a paper matching her threatening letters was found. You knew of the plot, did you not? To coerce her into a marriage, perhaps with the Conte, to secure her wealth. Elena's hands clenched. I am a merchant, not a schemer. Clara bought a veil, nothing more. And you, Mademoiselle Gatti, Poirot continued. Your loyalty to the Conte blinds you, but your handkerchief places you near a conspiracy. Were you an unwitting pawn, or did you know of the delivery to an island? Beatrice gasped, tears welling. I loved Clara. I would never harm her. Poirot turned to Whitfield. Monsieur, your love for Clara is true, but your absence from the ball raises questions. Did you know of her plan to confront her betrayer? Whitfield shook his head, his voice breaking. I knew only of her fear, her letters. I would have protected her. Poirot paused, letting the tension build. The truth, it is this. Clara discovered a scheme, led by Conte Vallieri and Signora Rossi, to force her into marriage for her fortune. The letters were meant to frighten her into compliance. Giovanni overheard this plan and tried to help her, earning a knife for his trouble. But Clara, she was clever. She used the hidden door, disguised herself, and fled to an island, perhaps Burano, perhaps Torcello, to hide until the danger passed. The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words sinking in. Vallieri's composure cracked, his hands trembling, while Eleanor's eyes darted to the door. Beatrice sobbed softly, and Whitfield gripped his book as if it were a lifeline. Signora Moretti rose, her voice steady. Monsieur Poirot, where is my niece? Is she safe? Poirot's moustache twitched. I believe she is, madame. Tomorrow I shall find her, and the shadows will be banished. As the guests dispersed, Poirot stood alone in the ballroom, the chandeliers casting long shadows. The truth was near, but the island remained the final piece. He would seek Clara there, and the conspirators would face justice. Chapter 7. The Lady Revealed. The morning light filtered through the Venetian mist, casting a soft glow over the lagoon as Hercule Poirot stood at the Palazzo Moretti's dock, his mind a whirl of deductions. The dramatic confrontation in the ballroom had shaken the conspirators. Conte Lorenzo Vallieri's trembling hands, Elena Rossi's furtive glances, Beatrice Gatti's tears, and Henry Whitfield's quiet desperation had all confirmed Poirot's hypothesis. Clara Moretti had not been kidnapped, but had fled to escape a plot to seize her inheritance. The clues, Jasmine at the hidden door, the anonymous, letters, the diary's vow to face the truth, Giovanni's attack, and the whispered talk of an island, pointed to a refuge in the lagoon. Poirot's little grey cells had narrowed the possibilities to Torcello, a quiet island with a convent known for sheltering those in need. Today, he would find Clara and unravel the final threads of this Venetian mystery. Poirot summoned Marco, the gondolier, whose steady oar and silent demeanour had become as familiar as the canals themselves. Monsieur Marco, Poirot said, adjusting his Homburg hat, we journey to Torcello, to the convent of Santa Maria della Grazia. I believe Mademoiselle Clara has sought sanctuary there. You will take me swiftly, oui? Marco nodded, his eyes betraying a flicker of respect for Poirot's insight. Si, signore. Torcello is far, but I know the way. The convent is a place of peace, hidden from prying eyes. The gondola glided from the Grand Canal into the open lagoon, the water a mirror of the pale sky. Torcello lay distant, its ancient bell tower rising like a sentinel above the marshes. The journey was serene, broken only by the cry of gulls and the rhythmic splash of Marco's oar. Poirot's thoughts turned to Clara's diary, its final entry a declaration of courage. She had known her betrayer, perhaps Vallieri or Eleanor, and had chosen flight over surrender. The attack on Giovanni suggested the conspirators feared exposure, but Clara's silence, no ransom, no word, hinted at a calculated escape. As Torcello's shores came into view, the island's solitude enveloped them. Its sparse houses and single canal contrasted with Venice's bustle, and the convent, a low stone building surrounded by cypress trees, exuded an air of quiet sanctity. Poirot disembarked, instructing Marco to wait, and approached the heavy oak door. A nun, her face serene beneath a white wimple, greeted him with a questioning gaze. "I am Hercule Poirot," he said, bowing slightly, "and I seek a young woman who may have sought refuge here. Her name is Clara Moretti." The nun's expression softened, and she led him through a cloister fragrant with rosemary to a small parlour where Signora Moretti awaited, having been summoned by Poirot the previous night. The widow's eyes were red-rimmed but hopeful. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, "is it true? Is Clara here?" Before Poirot could respond, the door opened, and a young woman entered, dressed in a plain grey robe, her chestnut hair hidden beneath a scarf. Her face, though pale, bore the luminous eyes of Clara Moretti. Signora Moretti gasped, rushing to embrace her niece, who returned the embrace with a mixture of relief and resolve. "Zia Isabella," Clara said, her voice steady. "I am safe, thanks to Monsieur Poirot." Poirot, seated on a wooden bench, regarded Clara with a gentle smile. "Mademoiselle, you have led Hercule Poirot on a chase most intriguing. You will tell me, if you please, why you fled and who you feared." Clara sat beside her aunt, her hands folded tightly. "I discovered a plot, monsieur, at the ball. I overheard Conte Vallieri speaking with Signora Rossi in a side chamber. They planned to force me into marriage with Lorenzo, to control my inheritance. The anonymous letters were Elena's doing, meant to frighten me into compliance. I confronted Lorenzo during our dance, telling him I knew his scheme. He laughed, thinking me helpless, but I resolved to escape." She paused, her eyes distant. "Giovanni, the butler, had warned me days before. He'd overheard their plans and urged me to be cautious, but I trusted him. That night, I slipped through the hidden door behind the tapestry, wearing a servant's cloak over my gown to avoid notice. I took a gondola to Torcello, where the sisters welcomed me without question. I hid my sapphire dress in a trunk here, hoping to return when the danger passed." Poirot nodded, his moustache twitching with satisfaction. "And the watcher in your diary, mademoiselle, who was he?" Clara's gaze hardened. "Giovanni, at first. Lorenzo paid him to watch me, to report my movements. But Giovanni's conscience troubled him, and he tried to help me instead. I fear that's why he was attacked." Signora Moretti's face darkened. "That scoundrel Vallieri, and Elena Rossi, whom I trusted. What of Beatrice Gatti, Monsieur Poirot? Was she part of this?" Poirot shook his head. "Mademoiselle Gatti, I believe, was innocent, though blinded by her affection for the Conte. Her handkerchief found near the Rialto was likely planted to mislead. The true culprits are Vallieri and Rossi, with Giovanni as their reluctant pawn." Clara reached into her robe, producing a small bundle of letters, the same threatening notes Poirot had seen. "These came to me over weeks," she said. "I kept them to prove the threat, should I need to. I planned to show them to Henry, but feared he'd act rashly." Poirot examined the letters, their ink and paper matching the scrap from Burano. "You were wise, mademoiselle, to seek refuge. But tell me, why no word to your aunt or to Monsieur Whitfield?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I feared for their safety. If Lorenzo and Elena knew I'd fled, they might harm those I love. I left my diary, hoping someone would find it and understand." Signora Moretti clasped Clara's hand. "My brave girl, I should have seen the danger." Poirot rose, his expression resolute. "Madame, mademoiselle, the danger is not yet past, but it shall be. I will return to Venice and ensure the conspirators face justice. Mademoiselle Clara, you will remain here until I send word." With Signora Moretti's agreement, Clara stayed at the convent, her safety assured by the nuns. Poirot and the widow returned to Venice, the gondola cutting through the lagoon's still waters. At the Palazzo Moretti, Poirot summoned the polizia, presenting the letters, Clara's diary, and Giovanni's testimony, now freely given under promise of protection. Valieri and Eleanor were arrested that evening, the Conte's charm crumbling under interrogation, while Eleanor's defiance melted into confession. They had planned to coerce Clara into marriage, using threats and Giovanni's reluctant spying, but her escape had thwarted them. Beatrice Gatti, cleared of involvement, wept with relief at Clara's safety, though her heart broke over Valieri's betrayal. Henry Whitfield, summoned to the palazzo, was overjoyed to learn of Clara's return, their engagement reaffirmed with Signora Moretti's reluctant blessing. Giovanni, recovering from his wound, expressed remorse, his role limited to spying under duress. As Poirot prepared to depart Venice, he stood by the Grand Canal, the city's lights shimmering like stars on the water. The case had been a dance of shadows, but his little grey cells had prevailed, piercing the mask of deception. Boarding Marco's gondola for the station, he murmured, "The truth, it is always there, waiting for Hercule Poirot to find it."